From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Feeling the pinch.
I'm Charles Denny. Tennessee farmers expect higher commodity prices this year, but their cost to grow those crops is also on the rise. That story from Jackson, Tennessee, coming up on AgDay.
High prices weigh on producers' minds as gas and diesel prices hit another record.
The Economy Barometer plummeted this month.
Concern grows about the potential for a world food crisis as Russia attacks Ukrainian grain storage. And pork producers saw big profits last year, so why are we seeing some empty barns? We get an update as Pork Week continues right now on AgDay.
Pork Week, paying tribute to the pork producers who bring lean and nutrient-rich pork to your table. Coverage brought to you by Merck Animal Health and the National Pork Board.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Corn and soybean prices continuing to edge higher on Tuesday, while wheat futures were lower after Monday's sharp gains. Traders watching and waiting for any progress in talks to allow Ukraine to resume grain shipments to the world. Russia claims two major ports in Ukraine on the Sea of Azov, which it had seized, are ready to resume grain shipments. But Russia appears to still be targeting grain facilities. Now, this storage site in the southern part of the country was destroyed over the weekend. The European Council president is accusing Russia of using food supplies as, quote, a stealth missile against developing countries. He is also blaming the Kremlin for the looming global food crisis. A Kremlin spokesperson is pushing back, saying Ukraine needs to demine approaches to ports so the Russian military can clear ships to export grain. USDA Secretary Tom Vilsack, part of a roundtable discussion on food insecurity concerns stemming from the Ukrainian crisis, saying Russian President Putin didn't count on U.S. allied countries joining forces to fight world hunger.
And he probably hoped that the tension would strain our relationships with one another. But in fact, he was wrong. We continue to prove him wrong by keeping the lines of trade open, by avoiding export restrictions, by sharing resources, and by working together through these difficult times.
Ukraine officials say they will only be able to export 2 million tons of grain per month if Russia doesn't lift its blockade of its Black Sea ports. Now, before the invasion, it was exporting 6 million tons a month. Meanwhile, gas and diesel prices have climbed to another record high. AAA reporting prices across the nation are now averaging $4.91 a gallon. That's a 30-cent increase from last week and $1.86 higher than this time last year. The national average has been rising steadily for the past month, setting 27 records in the last 28 days. And in 10 states, plus Washington, D.C., the average price is already at $5 or more. Diesel prices also hitting a new record of $5.68 a gallon. And it may not be over. Oil analysts expect the national average price of gasoline to rise above $5 a gallon in the next week or so. And escalating input costs, including the cost of gas and diesel, appear to be factoring into this month's CME Group Purdue University Ag Economy Barometer. The barometer plummeting to a reading of just 99. It was 121 last month. That's the weakest farmer sentiment since April of 2020. Ag producers' perceptions of current conditions on their farms as well as future expectations both weakening this month.
Farmers continue to tell us that their number one concern for their farming operation is farm input cost. And this month, for the second month in a row, we asked producers what they expect to see for cost in 2023 relative to 2022. And roughly 1 out of 5 producers continue to tell us that they expect to see a rise in input prices of 20% or more in 2023, on top of the huge rise in input prices that's already taken place in 2022.
Fewer producers this month say they experienced difficulty in purchasing crop inputs than reported having difficulty through the winter and early spring. Purdue researchers say this suggests that input availability did not impact planting progress this spring. We're keeping an eye on rain and record heat for parts of the country. Here midweek, meteorologist Matt Yersavik has an update. Matt?
Yeah, Clinton, we've seen some record heat already in parts of Texas, and more triple-digit heat all the way back into southern parts of California is possible. But along with that heat and the dry conditions, we've got that fire weather outlook again. And same places we've seen over the past couple of weeks, down to parts of Arizona and right through central parts of New Mexico as well. That includes Albuquerque, and that is an area that the elevated fire danger for today. So we're going to be seeing that as the potential for very dry and windy conditions along with that heat. Then we take a look at the drought monitor, and you can really see out west we still look at very dry conditions, especially right there in New Mexico, parts of Arizona, all the way back into Nevada and the San Joaquin Valley. Texas has also seen very dry conditions. Now, as we head into the next 10 days, you take a look at the precipitation here. There is a lot to be had, but unfortunately, it doesn't look like we're going to see enough in some of those parts of the country where we're dealing with those extreme to exceptional drought conditions to kind of resolve any of those. Still looking at some right through the middle of the country there, through the Corn Belt and down across the Gulf Coast, so we'll be keeping an eye on that. And certainly not a sight you want to see when checking on the fields. Scott Simpson of Ohio, Illinois, sharing this one, a cornfield hard hit by hail during recent storms. At the village about an hour north of Peoria, Scott says this corn was planted in April, and he doesn't think it's going to come back. I'll have more on your forecast coming up.
Some California lawmakers want to use taxpayer money to purchase water rights from farmers. The proposal comes from Senate Democrats. The proposal would set aside about $1.5 billion to buy senior water rights from farmers. Now, these rights, of course, allow farmers to take water from rivers and streams to irrigate their crops. Some senators argue buying water rights could avoid disagreements with farmers, environmental groups, and state regulators over how much water should be left in rivers and streams for environmental purposes. Coming off a record year of profitability in the pork production sector, you might expect expansion in the U.S. pork industry. However, that's not been the trend. AgDay national reporter Michelle Rook joins us to explain. Michelle.
That's right, Clinton. The last several USDA hogs and pigs reports have confirmed a smaller herd in the U.S. Now, there's a number of headwinds keeping the numbers down from 5 to 6% over a year ago, including disease. And so it looks like that trend may continue for a while. The U.S. pork herd has been contracting and is down from a year ago as many operations have been hit by PRRS and PED, including Dave Mensick, a pork producer from south central Minnesota.
A lot of empty barns is what I'm hearing also. A lot of empty barns in the industry because of disease pressure.
And he says that has put the brakes on expansion.
The hog slaughters are reduced 5 to 6% because we've had such a disease in our industry. So one of the biggest challenges that we have is to if we are going to expand, we got to do it in a way that we can have healthy pigs.
That's part of the reason so many new hog facilities have been built in South Dakota, where pork production has been growing at a rate of 7 to 8% a year.
Well, the attraction primarily is the fact that we don't have the hog concentration that some of our surrounding states have, and so that makes it very conducive to come to South Dakota.
And Mueller says so far they've seen less herd health issues over the last several months.
Iowa and Minnesota and Nebraska are seeing more population density of pigs and therefore have more exposure and more risk associated than we do in South Dakota.
However, noted swine economist Dr. Steve Myers says disease isn't the only issue limiting expansion.
Number two is we've had labor problems all over the place, including at the production level. And number three is the cost of building these buildings just went out of sight last year. And then there's the availability just of work to get a building put up.
Plus now high input and feed costs are also making pork production less attractive.
The feed prices are high, and to bring all this back is going to take a few months. It might even take a year before all this production is back in line. And then it's still a question of what's our feed prices going to be in a year from now.
He says fortunately higher hog prices have offset some of the cost, but he says his margins will still be under 2021. Myers says last year the lowest cost producers made a record $20 per head, with average producers around $10 per head. But this year it looks like those margins are going to be much slimmer, especially with the rising costs of production.
All right, thanks, Michelle. Of course, if you missed any of our Pork Week coverage or interested in what's happening in the pork industry, head over to porkbusiness.com for the very latest. All right, up next, look at markets, including lean hogs and the reasons behind the rally in corn and soybeans on Tuesday. That'll be next. And later, the pandemic was hard on restaurants. Now they're battling food price inflation. What it means for eating out, ahead on AgDay.
As your innovative and invested partner, Merck Animal Health is dedicated to the well-being of the swine industry and the people behind it. Merck Animal Health, driven by prevention.
Corn and soybeans both up double digits, while wheat slumped after Monday's big gains. AgDay's Michelle Rook has more on Tuesday's market moves.
Joining us with today's market analysis is Tom Fitzenmeyer with Summit Commodity Brokerage. Tom, higher day in corn futures on Tuesday, despite the fact we had some pretty strong crop ratings, and wheat was lower.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be a little bit positive about the corn market when you have what would really be viewed as a negative, price negative anyway, for the crop conditioning report and the planting progress, and yet we went higher today. So to me, that was a pretty positive for the corn market.
Yeah, and of course, the wheat market up and down. Monday, a nice up day. Tuesday down, but that market is having trouble figuring out what's really going on with Russia and the export ban and whether it's going to be on or off, right?
Well, yeah, that was the other thing that's positive, is that the corn market went higher despite the weakness in the wheat market today. But yeah, we sold off last week in wheat and corn in anticipation of a humanitarian corridor, I guess they like to call it, and possibility of grain moving out of Ukraine. And it just looks like that's not going to happen. The Russians, it seems unlikely, are going to allow the Ukrainians to have income to be able to fight against them. And they want sanctions lifted, and that's not going to happen. So that's somewhat, you see the corn putting some premium back on because of that. And you've seen that cash markets. The EU corn prices were firmer. Our prices are firmer. So I think the cash market around the world is starting to figure out that's not going to happen, and you're starting to put premium back in the cash side.
You bet. And soybeans getting above $17 seem to have triggered some technical buying on Tuesday.
Yeah, it did. And you know, we've turned momentum indicators back higher on soybeans. Soybeans have a pretty good story too. The processors are still making really good money crushing those soybeans, having a tough time finding them from the farmers. The few that still have any. South American supplies are starting to dwindle a little bit. So, yeah, there's a good story to tell in the beans as well as the corn market right now.
All right, thanks for joining us, Tom Fitzenmeyer with Summit Commodity, and more AgDay coming up.
AgDay is brought to you by the Pork Checkoff, celebrating pork and the people who bring it to your table through real pork. More details are available at porkcheckoff.org.
Meteorologist Matt Yurosavik joining us here. And Matt, as we look at the jet stream, boy, that looks like a pretty zonal flow across the country.
Yeah, it's kept that warm air to the south, a little bit cooler up in the Great Lakes, the Northeast, and that's kind of the flow we're going to be seeing over the next few days. And you can see a little ridge building there in the west as we head through the day on Wednesday. We're going to start to see a ridge build out there. That's going to bring in the warmth, keep things very dry. And as we kind of put this into motion as we head through Thursday and into the end of the week, this ridge getting a little bit bigger, keeping it hot and dry in the west, keeping it cooler across the northern Great Lakes and into parts of the north and the east, and also keeping it more active here in the east as well. And you can see even through Sunday, that ridge right through the middle of the country sliding eastward into next week, where it will get a little bit warmer, but staying extremely warm across the south. Here's a look at the temperatures this afternoon. Triple digits across the Gulf Coast all the way back into places like Phoenix and El Paso. And then as we head into the overnight, it's going to stay very muggy down there into the south, and we are going to be watching again for tomorrow afternoon. Again, very hot, very humid across the deep south. Jacksonville down to New Orleans, all the way down towards Brownsville could be in the triple digits, and that could be near 110 degrees back in Phoenix. Very hot, dry heat back there as we kind of keep an eye on this. So here's a look at this afternoon, kind of zoomed in there on the southwest. 105 in Yuma, 108 in Phoenix, and 106 in Las Vegas. Again, low humidity, but still very hot there in the west. And then we've got a chance for those storms from Amarillo, Texas, through Oklahoma and into parts of the mid-south. We're going to be keeping an eye on this with some pop-up thunderstorms, a couple of low pressure systems moving across Tennessee and then into the Carolinas as we head into the afternoon. And here's a look at those two systems moving eastward, and as they do, you'll see those storms pop up out ahead of them, but behind them, clearer skies, calmer weather, but still hot back there in the west, and that's going to continue as we head into Thursday afternoon before things will slowly start to settle down and another system will pop up in the center of the country. That's a look around the country. Now let's take a look at the weather where you live. Jackson, Tennessee, thunderstorms likely, a high of 84 degrees. Heading down to North Dakota, Ashley, mostly sunny, chance of afternoon shower, and a high of 68 degrees. In Fresno, California, sunshine and hot, a high of 96.
The struggle continues for American restaurants now dealing with food inflation. We'll have details next. And later, yes, commodity prices may be up, but that doesn't mean farmers are raking in profits. A closer look at the numbers in the country.
Find farm equipment on Machinery Pete's June 21st online auction. No reserve, no buyer fees. Start bidding now at auctions.machinerypete.com.
Restaurants were hit hard by the pandemic, and now they're getting hit again due to rising prices. Data analytics company MPD says food inflation contributed to an overall 4% decline in restaurant visits in April compared to a year ago. Meanwhile, there's been a 1% increase in consumer spending at restaurants, which is being attributed to higher prices. And visits to quick service restaurants, they also declined by 4% in April. One food industry advisor says for many consumers, it's more affordable to eat at home. A billionaire investor is dropping his proxy fight against Kroger. Carl Icahn has criticized the company over the treatment of pregnant sows. It comes just days after losing a similar battle at McDonald's. Icahn is withdrawing his nominees to Kroger's board. He has criticized both companies for their treatment of animals, saying confining sows in crates during their pregnancy or shortly after is inhumane. He also has pushed McDonald's to change how it sourced its pork, a move the burger chain said was completely unfeasible. Now, Kroger has previously said it is not directly involved in raising or processing of any animals. High prices don't always translate to good profits. We'll take a closer look at the evolving dynamics in the farm economy. Details in the country.
It's time to sign up for the 2022 United Pork Americas Conference in Orlando, Florida. Register today at UnitedPorkAmericas.com and join us September 7th through the 9th.
As we've been reporting, farmers are seeing higher commodity prices, but the money they have to spend to grow their crops sometimes negates any profit they might make. The University of Tennessee's Charles Denny takes us to one ag operation where careful management is a must.
Johnny Burrell does almost as much farming at this desk as he does in fields. Here in his office, he plans and decides what to add and what to cut. This is drone footage of the cotton crop at his place a few years back. Burrell Farms is a significant row crop operation just west of Jackson. More than 8,000 acres that also includes corn, soybeans, and wheat. But Burrell anticipates it will cost more to grow those crops this year compared to last.
Well, when you start putting a pencil to it or putting a spreadsheet to it, that could almost be 2.5, 3 times as much this year because of fuel and fertilizer.
Burrell is encouraged we will see higher commodity prices for crops, and there's the potential for modest profit margins in 2022. But meantime, he has expenses to pay. In the farming world, what are known as input costs. That's basically the money farmers have to spend in order to produce a good crop.
Because we raise a lot of corn, corn takes a lot of fertilizer. Wheat takes a lot of fertilizer. So, soybeans, we treat our soybeans like a true crop. We really push them. We put a lot of inputs on them too. So we're still going to try to do the best we can and stick to a good budget.
Commodity prices for some crops are up 25% in the past year, but input costs rose triple digits in some cases. COVID's impact on the economy, the war in Ukraine, and supply chain issues are all factors here.
For many farmers, fertilizer is their highest cost, along with seed, and the only defense is sometimes a decent commodity price.
I think that the reality is if that commodity price is not high enough, farmers will not grow the crop.
As the growing season goes forward, Tennessee producers must be as efficient as possible with their operations while hoping for good yields. We need farmers to grow food, but they also have to make it work from a business standpoint. This is Charles Denny reporting.
All right, thanks, Charles. And that's all the time we have this morning. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day out in farm country.